me to press?
Oh, too late. It's already been
Wow.
pressed. We are live. Welcome, everybody. Come in. I know you've been looking forward to this. I've been looking forward to this. I'm gonna retweet this on the old socials because today we're gonna be talking about the 40 most important player list for the Florida State Seminoles in 2024. And today, go with the meat of this sandwich. 30 through 21. I am joined by my two steady eddies. I've got Coach AB, I've got Kev Little, and I've got my other recording buddy, Dane Draper, my Noles247 brother. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. Yeah, this is like a 50% reunion right here or something. This is fun.
It feels good. It feels like a nice old pair of socks. Very comfortable and never lets you down. Speaking of never letting you down, on this episode of On the Bench, presented by Noles247, it's also live on YouTube. Chattanooga whiskey. That's that brown sweet juice that will never let you down. That's some good hooch. That is some fine hooch from the state of Tennessee. We hate their baseball team right now, but we'll still drink their liquor. It's the best. They got that 111 proof. That's like the workhorse, but like a very exotic, like not just your average workhorse. It's like a workhorse for the discerning gentleman. They've got like a founder's edition. Any purveyor that sells spirits worth their salt should have Chattanooga whiskey, and you should buy it. And you should scream at the cashier on the bench as loud as you can as you're purchasing the whiskey. There's no way you'll get in trouble, and you'll have a fun time. And as I always say, I don't know if it's what the sponsors want us to say, but when you're drinking, when you're sipping on a little bit of that fine Tennessee hooch, sell your house. Go crazy. It's a seller's market. And if you want to, use the Turner Group, especially if you live in Florida. They're based out of Central Florida, but the arms of that Turner Group octopus, they far outreach just Orange County. They reach everywhere. It's like that old J.J. Rockefeller like oil painting from the 1940s or whatever. That's what the Turner Group is, except way less nefarious and way more helpful. They can buy your house. They can sell your house. They will just help you with any home-related questions you may have. Maybe if they're nice enough, they'll do anything related to your home. They'll come to your house and watch Homeward Bound with your kids. I don't know if they'll do that or not, but if you want to buy or sell your house, great movie. They will help you. Tennessee whiskey, Chattanooga whiskey, Turner Group. Let's get into it.
Ooh, flawless victory.
It was something. I like those ad reads. I put a lot into it. And I know that we put a lot into this list. And I think before we get into it, I love the top 40 most important players series because of the rotating cast that we have in addition to us three fuddy-duddies. Dane, we talked about our methodology for our rankings on the last episode with Brendan. What about you, man? How did you approach this list as the cerebral assassin that you are?
I think like generally we probably all, I mean, it's a list of important players for the 2024 season, but it's important like
to nebulous term, right?
Yeah, like it's important to the team's success, but success in itself is kind of like a subjective term and what you would deem success. But I shoot generally maybe a little more than you guys, like definitely more than I think AB based on some of his, ridiculous rankings or something, based on I guess like high upside and ranking some of those guys a little higher, I guess that can like individually impact the ceiling of this team and their effort to maybe achieve, I guess, a playoff berth. But, really, if you're trying to win a playoff game or something, guys that would maybe exceed expectations in a realistic sense, that sort of thing. But it's a lot of factors you're balancing, though.
When you look at those factors, I feel like you're either one or two camps on what you prioritize more. Is it like positional importance, kind of like an NFL draft model as far as importance, or do you say talent trumps everything? Or is yours a chimera of the two, a Liger, if you will?
I would like to think of my list as a Liger. Yeah, that's
You're
what I had in
guy,
mind as well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I think it's generally I think there's plenty of positional importance in there. I definitely factored that in a good deal. Like I didn't want too many running backs on my list. I didn't want too many safeties, ranked high or something like that.
Sure.
But I like to add, maybe defensive end and defensive tackle have like the most depth on my, list of high or something like that as well. So I think I include some of that, but also I feel like some of these positions are like defensive end. You're pretty deep with talent. So, it's totally fair to even on a more talent based list to have some of those guys high. Yeah.
Bill says we're doing wins above replacement over here. We're going deep into the war.
I'm totally into that. Yeah.
Stat Nerd City. Well, let's talk about the one position that nobody mentioned in that little monologue. Let's talk about our number 30 guy. That's Cotton Fitzsimmons, Ryan Fitzgerald, the redemption arc of all redemption arcs. He's number 30. He's the place kicker, and he has turned into one of the best. What an unbelievable success story. One of the best in the entire country. So he's 30. The redshirt senior's 30 by our composite rankings. Zach had him 29. Adam the highest at 18th.
Mm-hmm.
Brendan 43. Totally off the list. I feel like that's a tad disrespectful. Kev at 39 just squeaks right in. Christy at 23. I had him at 30. Right on the dot. I feel like that's a great ranking. Dane's with me. Of course, he is my friend at 34. And Clay. I hope old Fitzsimmons doesn't see him at practice. He might kick him right in the schnutz. Unreal. Listen, when I did this list last year, just for full disclosure, I put the two starting special teams guys, Mastromano and Fitzgerald, 39 and 40. This year, I moved Fitz up 9 spots. I think he's about as important as a college kicker could be to me, and that's why I have him at 30. Adam, I'm going to let you go. You had him at 18, and I think you have a cogent argument for this. Why do you have him so high? Because you notoriously despise special teams.
I did, but I think I'm the only one that ranked him last year, and I had him at 13 or 14 last year.
When do you draft him in fantasy?
I mean, kicker's number 1 overall every year, for sure. Championships. I don't know. I just think that I don't think you're going to be as prolific scoring touchdowns perhaps this year, and you're going to have opportunities in the red zone to get points, and I think that's where he comes into play. I feel like you're going to need to get your field goals when those opportunities present themselves, because while you're potentially going to be an explosive offense, I don't know how efficient they're going to be at this point, so we'll see how that goes. But just right now, the good teams typically have good kickers, and I think this is going to be a good team, and it's important to have a good kicker. So there he is.
I'd say in 18, you consider Fitzsimmons a weapon.
Yeah.
Not just an important guy. He's a legit
weapon.
Kev doesn't. Kev says, no, you barely crack my list. What do you think? Is it just special teams guy that's as high as you could go on him, Kev? Or is there something more? Do you not trust everything you've seen from Mr. Fitzgerald so far?
No, I trust Fitzgerald. I think he's going to be one of the better kickers in the country. I actually think my point could be summarized in his own stats. So if you look at 2022 Ryan Fitzgerald versus 2023 Ryan Fitzgerald, they kicked the same amount of extra points. And in 2022, he only kicked one less field goal. He only attempted one less field goal. And he scored 93 points versus 115 points. So you're talking about on a season, a swing of about 20 points from a below average to a borderline elite kicker on the season. So, 20 points sounds like a lot, but that's just because I've been watching a lot of baseball recently. A strategic 20 points loses you the Clemson game or loses you the Boston College game. But a different way to think about it is if you had lost those 20 points somewhere else, it probably doesn't make that big of an impact, So I don't know. I was probably not generous enough. Looking at that,
you started off real strong, and then it's I probably should have bumped the bump.
This is way too in depth to talk about a damn kicker.
I think 30th is. I think where he settled is about right. I think 18 is a little high. Although, how many players are contributing to 20-point swings?
Good point
on the season.
That's what I thought you were going to make a point of how important he is. That 20 points, especially when we're talking about a potentially undefeated season and stuff like that. 20 points or 3 touchdowns essentially is a big deal, and the effort to go without.
Yeah, I mean, do we think
single
Brock
loss.
is going to have 3 touchdowns that are important this season? Maybe
I
not.
hope.
I
Hopefully
hope
not.
not. Dane Kev's a slippery eel. You can never pin him down. He zigs when he's about to zag. Let's talk about another guy who zigs and zags. Probably not, but I just use that as a segue. That's number 29. Defensive lineman, came in as a defensive end, playing a little bit of 3 technique. The transfer from West Virginia, Tomiwa Durojaiye. Very, very interesting. This redshirt sophomore, 6'4", 278. A very, very interesting prospect where he's going to end up, the type of things that he can unlock for you in those pass rush packages. Zach had him 18th. Adam had him 32nd. Brendan had him 27th. Kev had a 36. Chris Nee 38th. I had him 26, so pretty close to where he ended up. Dane, just simpatico, brother. You had him 29, really close, and Clay had him 36. This is a guy that I'm interested to see in the rotation and in which rotation he makes the greatest impact. Dane, you've gotten to see him at practice. What have you thought of the way he's integrated himself, and where do you think that he will make his greatest impact from the Noles this year?
Yeah, I think he was a guy that, I mean, like most guys, you see him improve over the course of the spring. But it's really interesting. I feel like, well, of course, I agree with the placing of 29. That's exactly where I put him. But like, he really kind of has a blend of a lot of factors that could make him more important than this. But I think even his floor is, I would argue, like in this kind of range too, because he will contribute. I mean, coaches are on record of saying like he is the guy that is getting real reps at defensive end and on the interior. So he's adding depth to both of those sides, and I think it's a bit more of like a bit more up in the air than a lot of people do as far as like where he'll contribute most. I think he could definitely contribute like plenty on the edge rather than just kind of fully transitioning to the defensive tackle room, like not a full-time 3 tech or something like that. But he could be, and I think he's also another reason for him to be valuable on a list like this is he seems to be like a high upside guy. He's pretty young, but he's a guy they brought in with some intention of developing into an NFL talent. So, you know, if he hits early, that could be really intriguing too. And his highest upside probably is on the interior. So maybe that's why, you know, people talk about that.
I like guys that have the potential to be disruptors that play on the inside. And I think with the way what we saw at his film at West Virginia, not the best like outside pass rush moves, very strong, very explosive, but the way that he would cross the tackle's face, I see him as a guy you line up in the 3 technique that could really create some havoc. And I think that could actually help you with some blitz and some stunt packages at him. And I think that you could really confuse some of those teams that you're playing this year that have strong interiors of their lines, like, you know, Florida, Miami, Notre Dame, things like that. He's a dude that's not a fun reach for a guard lining up in that 3 technique. What do you think about Tomiwa?
Yeah, first I'm disappointed in myself. I should have ranked him number 1 because he played his high school football in Delaware, and I absolutely
you
missed that
disrespected a fellow N.
I dropped the ball there, and I apologize. Tell me why. I really screwed up. I should have put you number 1, representing the first state. I think that I would have ranked him higher in all seriousness if he wasn't so raw. And he's moving into a position at 3 tech where there's some carryover from what he did with being a 4-eye and a 5 technique at West Virginia. But there's a lot of differences too. He's got to learn to play in a much tighter box now at 3 tech. It's just there's going to be some growing pains early, I think, and that's partially why I kind of have him in this 30 range. You know, I like me some D tackles and some D ends and D linemen in general, and I tend to rank them more aggressively. But I think it's going to take him a little bit of time to find his footing. But the upside's there. We know he's an explosive athlete. He's a strong player, stout against the run. It's just going to take him a little bit of time to kind of get his feet wet and I think get himself settled into that position.
I think so too, and I think that's well said. And he's a guy we talked about physical upside. To me, this next player, number 28, is kind of like the personification of that higher quality of athlete that Mike Norvell has brought in from his time since he started that he's had access to. And it's time for some of these guys to really show why they were such highly heralded Mike Norvell recruits. And I'm talking about number 28, sophomore linebacker Blake Nicholson, 6'3", 220 from out west. He's got a boatload of potential. We talked about it last week on our video. Linebacker is a position where there is a ton of opportunity there for the other guy next to DJ Lundy. We talked about Juice Cryer, Cam Riley. There's plenty of opportunity there, but the skill set that Blake Nicholson brings is really unique for this team. And I think it's kind of interesting. This range has a lot of guys that have a lot of potential, but haven't really shown it yet on the field. And I would say the rankings kind of show that. Zach had him at 30. Adam, you had him at 42. So off your list, obviously you think that there's a little bit more flash and substance there with those physical traits versus the production. Brendan had him at 23. Kev had him at 43. That's interesting that the two film guys really had kind of consensus on there. Chris had him at 26. I had him at 22nd. Dane 33. Kind of nice mix between like me and like Adam and Kev. Clay had him at 17. So he's very high on those physical traits. This is another one of those guys where, to me, like my ranking on him was a mixture of the position, and then he's a dude that is important to your team for me because you need to hit on one of these homegrown guys. And Blake Nicholson's important to me because he can do a lot of stuff in that linebacker room that most of the other guys really can't. And if he hits, he's really important to like the overall ceiling. He's like one of those overall ceiling players for me on just how a really good team could be a great team when we're not expecting it. Kev, you disagree. You just don't think – do you think it's just not his year? You've seen him play live. Do you think that do you have an issue with the awareness? Why do you have him off of your list as one of the most like if I'm assuming that if this was the 40 most talented, Blake Nicholson would not be unranked on your list, right?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. He's a guy that I think you're expecting to be a centerpiece of your defense moving forward. I just think if we're talking about impact this next season, I think Juice Cryer was a little bit more of a completed prospect coming out of high school. I think he's got a much lower ceiling, but I think he's closer to his ceiling as it is. You know, I think he's got a higher floor than what you're dealing with Blake Nicholson. Nicholson's got all the athletic tools, but I don't get the impression that the level of ball that he was playing in high school was really up to par with some of the things that, you know, some of these other kids were seeing. And so it's just taken a little bit more time to kind of get adjusted to the speed of the game, learn to use his athleticism. I think he's needed to put on good weight in a significant way that someone like Juice Cryer hasn't. So that just means that, you know, Juice Cryer's, I think, ready to see the field before a Blake Nicholson in this season, but that doesn't mean that I think Juice Cryer is going to be the more important player next year or the year after that.
That's fair, and I also like your underlying West Coast like football sucks bias that you've just thrown out there, and that's why the Pac-12.
I was trying not to say it.
No, it's good, but that's why the Pac-12 is dead because it deserved to die. All comments to the contrary at X's and Noles on Twitter.
Yeah, there you go.
Dane, what do you think, Blake? You've seen him out there. What do you think Blake's role is going to be this year? Like, who do you think is going to be the primary running mate with DJ Lundy? You've seen a lot of these guys out on the field.
I mean, ironically, I think it's maybe most likely going to be the guy who we haven't seen, which is Cam Riley. I think that might be the most likely guy. But I think I agree a lot with your line of thinking, Trey, of like, you know, being the high upside guys, kind of having a little bit greater value on a list like this when we're talking about elevating the ceiling of the team. Mm-hmm. And to Kev's point about like comparing him to Juice Cryer, because you kind of have to like gather this, you know, projected depth chart, like in your head of where you're going to put these guys, you know, because you want to weigh like snap count in your head and that sort of thing. And I think like snap count directly, yeah, like you could definitely make an argument for Juice Cryer to be ahead of Blake Nicholson or something if Blake doesn't take all the strides that you would hope he does. But as far as being like an important piece to the overall success of this team, I feel like neither of them have to be super vital, but like Blake Nicholson has the potential to really actually elevate the ceiling of this of that linebacker room, because he probably is the most talented guy overall in it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we saw the impact that an athletic linebacker, it's a position in Adam Fuller's defense that we've downplayed, I think, over the years.
Mm-hmm.
But if you think about some of the most important defensive moments throughout the year, it's hard to argue that at least not 2 of the top 5 of the entire year weren't linebacker plays. Kalen DeLoach, Clemson, Tatum Bethune in that Louisville game, like an athletic guy back there, a weapon, can really have an impact. And that's why I'm saying it might be one of those things where, like Dane said, the success of the team doesn't hinge on a Blake Nicholson. But if you want to have like an outside shot at like winning the conference again and making a playoff run, a guy like Blake Nicholson with that type of athletic profile could get you there.
I don't necessarily buy that.
Why not?
Because I think you went out and got Cam Riley, who's a more veteran version of Blake Nicholson.
Yeah.
Blake Nicholson hadn't shown us he can play the run in the box yet. I mean, we all think that he's going to be able to, and we all think he's going to develop into that player. They think he's going to develop into that player. But right now it's all promise and upside. And that's all important. And yeah, he's maybe the most talented player in that room, but if you can't go out there and do it consistently, I mean, all that talent is only so valuable.
Right, but this isn't a 40 best players list.
No,
this is
but
a
it's 40 most
important.
And
right.
If you can't play because you can't do the job, then how important are you?
So you have him at 42. You're not expecting him.
No, because I think Cam Riley. I think Cam Riley's going to do his job. I think Cam Riley's going to be above him. I think he's going to play more than him. I think he's going to do that role. So I ranked Cam Riley aggressively, and I couldn't in turn then say, well, I think Blake Nicholson is important, but this other guy's going to play way more than him, and he's going to be over him. I just couldn't. I had a hard time saying, okay, I've got to get Blake Nicholson into my 30 range when I don't think he's going to have that job. I think Cam Riley's going to have that job.
Okay.
I think what my placement of Nicholson's kind of in between, right? It's like there's a pretty wide range here, but I'm more in between. And I'm in your line of thinking of we haven't seen it from him yet, so I'd like to see that. But at the same time, you, I think, are more ranking based on like what you believe will happen rather than like what realistically can happen. And that's why I think I'm like, 10 spots ahead of you or whatever. And I think he absolutely is someone that should be ranked because realistically he could make an impact and he could make a very big impact, but he probably won't.
Right. So production for you, I'd say, Adam, for you, and I think it's going to bear out with some of the other rankings that you had that we're going to talk about tonight. Production is king for you, right?
Production's already happened.
Yeah,
yes.
I wouldn't say that it's king. I would say that.
Oh, dude, man. Okay.
I would say that production is very important to me, though. Yes, I wouldn't say that it's king. I mean, positional value for me is king. I'm going to take a defensive end over a linebacker any day of the week, but then weighing that along with guys that I think that you're going to be able to trust and then yes, production, that's going to play a role for me. Yeah, for
over
sure.
Potential, I would say. And I think that's fair. And especially if you're like, hey, I'm projecting Cam Riley, who is a very interesting season. They did get him for a reason. Like, I get that. I
would say like wide receiver, and we'll get to him as we go along here. Like wide receiver is a position where I went with potential and I weighed, okay, at some point you've got to hit on one of these guys to combat some of these narratives that are out there. Whereas I've heard maybe at least once already tonight, and then I think it got brought up last time. Like there's some conversation around some of these guys getting ranked higher because you need them to hit. You don't need Blake Nicholson to hit this year to achieve your goals, in my opinion.
I think
you don't need Blake Nicholson to hit to be a good team. For the potential of a ceiling raiser to have a great season, then you need him to hit. I get what you're saying. I think
He's
if
that
you
important to it.
no, I think he's the 22nd most important guy because I think he's got the potential of being your other starting linebacker with a skill set that nobody else has. And I think to have good teams, you have good players playing well. To have great teams, you have players playing up to their athletic potential. That's why I think it's important. But Kev, you were going to say something?
I see Blake Nicholson on the Kalen DeLoach track. DeLoach was thrown in as a freshman, wasn't very useful, struggled. Sophomore year, you saw him pick up a new defense, kind of wasn't what he needed to be, and he got sat for a good portion of it. Comes back junior year, and he's one of your better players. Comes back senior year, and he's one of the best linebackers in the ACC. And I think that's where you're looking for Blake Nicholson. I think he's a year away from being someone who's going to give you that. I think he's a year away from what DeLoach was last year or 2 years ago, his junior year.
That's fair.
That's where I'm at.
Steady improvement. So I actually like both sides of the coin. I get both. It's one of those ones where I think one of the two camps is going to be right on this one. I just don't know which one yet. Let's move on to the next one, a guy that we have seen a lot of at Florida State, maybe not as much as we'd like to see, and that's number 27, Kentron. Is it really pronounced Poitier? It's not like a city. It's not Poitier. It's not
it looks like Poitier. But
it should be
disappointing.
Every time I want to see it, I want to give respect to the GOAT Sydney. But Kentron Poitier, what he prefers, redshirt senior, 6'3", 208, a guy that we have seen so many flashes of. Florida State has such a hodgepodge of dudes at wide receiver. No true number one like you had last year with Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson. There's a lot of stuff to replace there. So just like linebacker, a lot of opportunity. And Kentron's one of the more seasoned guys in the group. Zach has him at 22nd. Adam has him at 24th. Brendan at 32nd. Kev 34th. Chris 31. Everybody's kind of similar here. I had him at 28th. Dane, you were high on him at 20th. Clay had him at 37, so almost didn't make his list. Dane, do you think that, do you project Kentron as, possibly the number one wide receiver this year, a clear number two? I mean, inside the top 22, you have him as a starter. Why and where do you see Kentron making his biggest impact this season?
I think your number one guy in that room, and the entire wide receiver room, has to be Malik Benson at this point, because I think he's the most talented guy, and he's should be primed to actually succeed in that offense, especially with how we feel that offense is going to run with the vertical ball and all that stuff. But ideally in this Mike Norvell offense, the isolated boundary big wide receiver, which is called the 9, that is supposed to be, I think ideally it's supposed to be the top dog in that offense. It has been in recent years, or with Devante Coxey even at Memphis, and Johnny Wilson since Mike Norvell's been here and stuff. That's supposed to be your kind of top dog. And I think it's important, AB was saying, is it really important that Blake Nicholson hits this year? No, I don't really think it is. But then you made a great point, I thought, about, elevating the ceiling of the team. That's where I would think as well. But for Kentron Poitier, I think it is important that he kind of reaches a ceiling that might not be exceptionally high, but it's important that he stays healthy for the first time in a little while, and can be, I think he'll probably start. I would think that at this point, at least over Hakeem Williams, who's the other 9, and that offense at this point. And if he's a reliable guy on the outside who can win one-on-ones reliably, at least in the ACC and that sort of thing, I think that would be a really important thing for your offense and for a passing game that at the moment seems kind of up in the air of how effective it's going to be and stuff, at least without, having a really good run game next to it to complement it.
Kev, where do you have Mr. Poitier? I don't like saying it. I want to say Poitier so bad. Where do you have Mr. Poitier in your hierarchy of receivers? Do you expect his role to expand? You're a little bit lower on him than we are. Is that maybe due to injury history? Not a guy that you can count on, that you really want to count on? What do you think?
Yeah, I think Dane was kind of dancing around my thoughts on it in the sense that, you need a 9, but I'm not sure that he's your guy. He's shown potential. He's shown moments. He was our king of the spring last year. He was a guy that, you thought was going to break out, but just never has. It seemed like this was going to be his year, and then he just didn't have a great spring. But then you also have Williamson, and you have just, it feels like you have a bunch of just guys that you're not sure which one of them are going to step up alongside Benson. So it's hard to rank any one of them high, because right now it feels like they're all kind of interchangeable, and one of them is going to step up, hopefully, if this team's going to be successful. So it's hard to really know which one to bank on. And when I was doing this rating, it was like, I want to put Poitier and Williamson in the same place, because I think that they're two receivers that could be the guy that steps up.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if I've seen enough of either one of them to be confident that one's better than the other.
A lot of projection in that receiver room, a lot of opportunity. Let's move on to the next one, talking about rotations. We're talking defensive line, redshirt sophomore, number 26. We have Daniel Lyons, 6'4", 290. Limited stats last year, 16 tackles, did have a 71.4 PFF grade. This is an interesting one, Adam, obviously. I'm going to defer to you on these defensive linemen. Zach had him 26. Adam had him 27th. Brendan 30th. Kev 27th. There's a lot of consensus on this. Christy had him at 35th. I had him at 23rd. Dane 23rd. Clay 29th. The reason that I'm a little bit higher on him is once again, it's kind of my reason for liking Tomiwa. If you're going to play on the interior, I like somebody who's a plus as a pass rusher. Unfortunately, I'd like to see more consistency, but he's one of those guys. I like his pass rushing skill. I like him even in tandem with some of the starting guys, projected starting guys like Daryl Jackson and Josh Farmer. And he's another one. If you got a guy in the interior that can disrupt and can have an interior pass rush, it raises the entire ceiling of the team. So that's why I'm a little bit higher on him at 23. Adam, you're pretty close, 27. What do you think about Daniel Lyons' game? I feel like he's a guy that really is primed for a breakout.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of his potential, and it's why I ranked him 27th, and especially at the defensive tackle position, potentially being your number 3 defensive tackle. He's a player that's got to lock in, though. Like, he's a guy that's got to decide, now's my opportunity to kind of take a next step and really grab the bull by the horns here and seize this number 3 job behind Daryl Jackson and Josh Farmer. So I was curious where he was going to kind of fall in the fold here. And I thought at 27, I might have been aggressive. And then I was shocked to see I was kind of right where everybody else was with him. He has plus pass rush ability. He's a guy that can anchor on the inside and play the run. We've seen a lot of flashes from him. But again, like you kind of pointed out, we haven't seen a lot of consistency from him. And we haven't seen him do it in big stretches. So I'm curious to see what it's all going to look like when he's got more snaps to be dependent upon.
Right.
And then just kind of where he goes from there. I don't think the reports are always great about Daniel. So like I said, he's a guy that I hope this summer has kind of gotten himself locked in and is ready to roll.
I think so too, because if he can make those flashes consistent, and Florida State is a team that rotates a ton on the interior, hopefully to give Daniel Lyons as many fresh reps as possible. But his workload's going up with all the guys that they lost. He can be a real weapon for a deep group of defensive ends, but that doesn't have the top end talent when a guy's like a Jared Verse leaves, right? You're doing a little bit by committee at defensive end outside of Patrick Payton. Man, it's something going on the interior. You can make a quarterback's life hell. Anything else you guys want to add on Daniel Lyons before I get to this next one, which I think might take up a little bit of time in the discussion?
Yeah, I wanted to say something about Daniel Lyons. He's one of those guys that it never feels like my eye test matches what the narrative is, if that makes sense.
What do you see?
Every time I see him on the field, he flashes. I think he's got a lot of length. I think he disrupts the interior. I think he's a really solid piece for pass rush as a pass rushing defensive tackle. I think he's going to be in a good position. I thought we saw a decent amount out of him. And I was just checking PFF. PFF has him as the 14th highest rated player, and almost everybody above him is someone who got drafted or will be drafted. it felt like every time I saw him on the field, he looked good. And then you hear people talk about him at practice. You see Chris Nee and Brendan, who see him at practice every day and do these practice reports, not seem to love him. And it's kind of hard for me to like piece those two pieces of information together. And so I think I would have been tempted to put him way higher because I do think he's going to be more important. But I was kind of like remembering that, hey, like the reports about him at practice or whatever, the like overall narrative on Daniel Lyons doesn't seem positive, even though my own eye test tells me, hey, I think this is a kid that can be really good for you.
That's why I'm at 23, dude. The talent was just too tantalizing, and I think that he would like it, he'd be a consistent Daniel Lyons paired together with like a Daryl Jackson, or paired together with like a Tomiwa, or what. Like he unlocks some fun packages for you. He just needs to put it together. Let's talk about number 25.
I think Dean wanted to add something there.
Dean, well, go ahead.
Yeah,
I apologize.
I think like, I mean, just, you know, being around Brendan and Chris, for example, and they're like, I think, okay, so I was really high on Lyons coming into the spring. He was a guy I wrote a lot about. He was like my pick for king of the spring and stuff because I thought he deserved a lot of love. I thought he's like one of the few guys on the team that's most primed to, it's kind of like the Josh Farmer arc of, you know, a guy you know is probably going to end up being good, and he's playing behind talented guys, and he's playing at a position that, you know, even if he's not a starter, he's going to end up playing a lot of snaps, and he could flash plenty and that sort of thing. And I think Lyons, from a ceiling standpoint, I mean, at this point in Josh Farmer's career, when he was Lyons' age or whatever, I mean, you would say Lyons probably has the higher ceiling based on his length and pass rushing upside and that sort of thing.
Absolutely.
So like I like Daniel Lyons a lot, but I think there was also that kind of expectation built in going into the spring, and you wanted to see him, I mean, maybe again in that Josh Farmer arc, like really kind of take over some practices. Because Josh Farmer, for example, again, is like an excellent practice player and that sort of thing. And I think Lyons just didn't really flash a ton, I guess, in the spring, and especially like while like a Grady Kelly looked awesome in the beginning of spring and stuff like that. And that's a guy all you cared about with Grady Kelly was just floor, because, you know, of course he's not going to be some special talent, and then he looks like a really nice player at times. So I think you want to see more out of Lyons. I mean, he is ranked 26. I, along with Trey, had him at the highest, you know, at 23, is like a very important non-starter. And some of that's based on snap count, some of that's based on positional importance or whatever. But no, Daniel Lyons, like, if he's doing what he's supposed to be doing, which he very well could be, he should be a really important player because he's also very talented.
And I think he will. And so do you. Let's get to number 25. This is an interesting one. This is a dude you want to talk about. If this was a top 40 most talented player list, I'd be very interested to see where this kid falls. We're talking about number 25, sophomore, highly, highly, highly coveted safety recruit, Conrad Hussey, a dude that did make his presence known at times during the season, was inconsistent, but man, the highs were really, really high, and Florida State is looking for a talented running mate for veteran and guy who we will definitely see later on this list, Shaheem Brown. He had a 75.4 PFF grade, 22 tackles last year, and let's get into these fun rankings. Clay had him at 16th. Kev had him at 17th. Dana and I both had him at 21, excuse me. Chris Nee had him at 24, a little bit lower. Brendan at 34, crazy at 34. Zach even crazier at 35. And Adam Brown.
It should say 45. It should say 45. I had him at 45.
The star of the message board comment section, Conrad Hussey, completely unranked. I will give you the time to talk about why you think this guy. Okay.
Not a lot of time necessary. In my opinion, he's your number 4 safety this year, and I just can't rank a number 4 safety that highly.
for the entirety of the year, you don't think that talent is ever going to catch on throughout the entirety of the year?
No, I really don't. I really don't. I don't love the things that I hear about him out of practice. Like I think he's a year away. Like if we're doing this list next year, I got a feeling I'm going to have him like 10th.
42.
And I don't think he's there this year, and that's okay to say. Like it's not
a lot of
knock on
people
him.
didn't think it was okay to say.
I don't care what people think. Whatever. People are going to think what they want to think. They're going to see lists and guys not ranked, and they're going to say, "Oh, you hate that guy." I was one of the main ones, like going crazy when they got him, talking about how elite he is going to be as a coverage safety and all these things. And I'm still really excited about his future. I think that there's some growing up that needs to happen, and we're going to see if it occurs or not. And I wasn't going to rank him because I'm not. Like I said, I had him at 45. I don't know why it says 50, but I don't think that he's going to be that important for this defense this year. I think Amarion Cooper's going to play at safety. I think Devante Brown's going to play at safety. I think Shaheem Brown's going to play at safety. Like I think those other guys are going to play a bigger role over the course of the season on this defense. It's tough for me to say, okay, the number 4 safety, I've got to get him in there because he's super talented. This isn't the most talented list.
Interesting to me because I rarely ever get to do this. Kev, based on your ranking, you think
I can't believe Kev's got him 17.
You think Adam's a caveman. Why do you have Conrad Hussey at 17th based on film that everybody has seen? We have seen the good. We've heard about some of the inconsistencies. Why do you think that he's going to be your projected, at least, and you did your rankings by the end of the year, you think Conrad Hussey's going to be the other guy starting next to Shaheem Brown?
Yeah, to be frank, I think he has to be. I'm pulling up the stats now. So last year, you had Shaheem Brown, and next to him was Akeem Dent.
Mm-hmm.
When Akeem Dent was on the field, FSU was at 4.1 yards per play allowed, which I've got to sort here for a second.
I think we can say that
would be first in the country. That'd be the best defense in the country when Akeem Dent was on the field. FSU was number 1 in the country in yards per play. When Akeem Dent was not on the field, care to guess?
They weren't great.
88.
Bigger drop than I thought. And you could tell, especially in the running game. I feel like a lot of teams capitalized on him.
You want to know what Akeem Dent was? He was dependable.
I'm not sold at what you have at safety outside of Shaheem Brown. He's the only one has played a snap of safety in a Division I game besides Conrad Hussey.
This is more of the we need him to be good because this guy kind of needs to be your other starting safety for a high level defense type deal.
If you want to win a playoff game, you need Conrad Hussey to be good. Because I think what you have outside of him
is kind of pedestrian a little bit.
Yeah, I mean,
Devante Brown was a very good corner 2 years ago at UCF. I'm sorry he got coached by Miami last year.
Oh, the Miami Neg.
He's just never played safety. Yeah. Maybe he's the guy. I'm just saying, if you want, I think you can have like a top 15 defense with those guys. But if you want like a top 10 defense, it's going to really help to have Conrad Hussey come on. Like, I think the reason why I gave him such a high rating is because I do think if the switch flips for him, you'll see a dramatic change in the defense. But I mean, if I'm a betting man, I'm with AB. I don't think that will happen this year.
But if it does, it's one of those. That's to me, it was what we were talking about, the Blake Nicholson thing again. You can be good without him, but there's only a certain number of guys on either side of the ball that if they play up to their athletic potential, the entirety of that unit can get better quicker than we expect. And that's like one of those guys. Conrad Hussey's definitely one of those guys. And a lot of it has to do with his talent, but a lot of it has to do with what Kevin said. You've got Shaheem Brown and then some steady hands that were steady hands at other positions that are transitioning to safety for the first time in this defense. it's somebody's going to have to step up, play next to Shaheem. Dane, what do you think? I mean, I feel like you're kind of falling on he's the most important. You've seen him. If you had to bet, I mean, you'll probably say all the same things that Kevin and I said for why you have him in your most important. But I want to get to the one thing Adam said. If you had to bet on Conrad Hussey taking the next step this year or in 2025, what would you bet?
I would take 25 because I agree that if we're betting on like what we think will happen, if it has to be black or white, then yeah, I would bet against him this year. But
why do you say that? Because you've seen him a lot more on the practice field.
Yeah, I think he's such a clearly like one of the top like high upside guys on the field. He flashes when he flashes, it's picking the ball off in some impressive fashion, showing off crazy range or ball skills or some kind of thing that not many guys on the roster can do. But he's also, we're talking about dependability, which is really important, especially in this. I mean, for like, last line of defense, safety or whatever.
Absolutely.
But I mean, this is a quarter scheme. This is a difficult position to play in this defense. You got to do a lot of stuff. You got to do it right. And if he's not doing it right consistently, and we didn't see him do it right consistently at all, contrary to a lot of like the fan base's belief, last season, like if he doesn't drastically improve, then he's not going to take that leap this year. But he might.
Crazy? Am I crazy? Or did it seem like one play happened or one thing happened and he got like the yips last year?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well,
like just
get the yips, so he just got benched. I mean,
yeah.
That BC game when they ran that like tight end, ran that hidden tight end play, and I'm still not convinced it was actually his fault. We stopped seeing him, and then eventually Mike Norvell was like, "We've got to play him. We've got to play him. We've got to get him on the field." And
I wonder because last year was that all-in moniker. I wonder if they're going to be a little bit more apt to let some of these young guys take their lumps and learn through it within the same game. I'm interested to see how that goes. We'll see.
Probably.
I don't know.
You're probably going to blow a lot of teams out too. So
yeah. And it's funny. This was a big topic of conversation on the message board, but it's kind of funny as you transition into the next guy on this list, number 24, also safety, a guy that we just kind of spoke about a little bit, and that's redshirt senior Miami transfer Devante Brown. This is the guy, and to Adam's point, like I have Conrad Hussey higher up on my list. I have Devante Brown at 25th. I have Conrad Hussey at 21st. I think that Devante Brown is going to get the lion's share of the snaps, especially at the beginning of the season at safety. And I think that a lot of people have that consistency. There's not as much wild variation on Devante Brown's ranking as there is with Conrad Hussey, because you know what you're going to get, and that is a valuable thing at a position like safety to pair up with a talented and a known quantity like Shaheem Brown. So Zach had Devante at 32nd. Adam had him at 25th, Brendan 21st, Kev 31st, Chris Nee 21st, like I said, 25th for me, Dane 28th, Clay 24th. It's interesting because if there was a less heralded transfer out of the portal, I can't remember one since Trey Benson from Oregon as far as like the initial, and I get it. Last year, he did not cover himself with glory, but to Adam's point, he was getting coached by that Miami defensive staff, dude. I mean, it is what it is
in a major way. I mean, and they're I'm not going to pile on, but
go ahead. It's fun.
We don't think very highly of them, but this is a situation where like I feel like everybody ranked Conrad Hussey higher than Devante Brown because of Conrad Hussey's upside. And it's like, I mean, at what point do we not listen to the coaches because they raved about Devante Brown all spring? Do we not pay attention to the intels coming out, which pretty much says like Devante Brown's probably going to be the starter opposite of Shaheem Brown? Do we not go back to what we know he did in 2022 at UCF, where he was one of the most coveted corners coming out of that school and was a very good player? And then we say, okay, so we know he was a very good coverage player. They're a light box defense. They want a coverage player back there that they can depend on. And we've seen him be a really good coverage football player and acclimate himself to the safety position this spring. Like I didn't get why he didn't get more love on this list.
To be fair, in the aggregate, he is rated higher than Conrad.
He
Hussey.
is. You're right. Absolutely.
So we did weigh that in. There's just
but only because I didn't rank Conrad Hussey. Like if you put a 30 in there for me, I bet Conrad Hussey jumps him.
I don't know. Brendan had him at 21st. Chris had him at 21. I had him at 25th. I think the funny thing about this is the eyes of the people at practice watching the film, and especially the speed with which these coaches said, "Dude, they sign me up. I want all Devante Brown at safety." I think we think he's a way more important guy than the fan base does, and I 100% expect a bounce back year from him. I 100% expect that, and I think everybody else does too. And I think we talked enough about safeties. Let's get to number 23. Let's talk about some wide receivers. And let's talk about redshirt senior Jakai Douglas. He is our 23rd most important player. 5'9", 199, a guy that, was dealing with some injuries at the beginning of the year, but really, when you had him near the end of the year, the type of stuff that he can do is fun. He's dependable. He's versatile. And I'm glad that he got his brother to come play with him, another guy we'll talk about later. Zach had him at 19th. Adam had him at 23rd. Brendan 26th. Kev at 33rd. Chris 17th. I also had him at 33rd. Dane 27. Clay 23rd. Speaking for myself, I just think that while I like him, he's dependable. I don't foresee him to have I feel like his role is his role. He's going to do what he's going to do, and it's what he's done the past couple of years. Now, could I look like a fool, especially with all the opportunity in the receiver room? 100%. But I think that Jakai Douglas is a very important part of the offense, and I think he can do some things very well, but it's going to be sort of the same stuff that you've seen. Dane, what do you think? Do you think that actually Jakai is getting slept on a little bit in this list with his familiarity in the offense and kind of the open opportunities that exist at the receiver position? Does he have an opportunity to be like your consistent starting slot guy?
I think that's what he is, but I think that also doesn't have to be like such an important thing to where you're ranking him, ahead of, I guess, where he is. I mean, I have him at 27. That's close enough to where he's ranked now. I mean, at 23, it's basically just like he's ranked as like the highest tier of, backup or the lowest tier of like starter from an important standpoint. So, and I think that's totally fair. I think that's where he should be. He can be a weapon, not necessarily like I guess he's kind of a specialized weapon in a sense. I don't know. I think
you're really laboring over how to give this man his moniker. I thought special weapon was pretty cool, man. You should stick with that.
Yeah, I think you put it well, saying like what he is. I guess.
Now you're just sucking up.
Toward the back end of last year, so like health has been a concern with him.
Mm-hmm.
I think when we're talking about ceiling, maybe that's something that like could increase like his perceived value at this point and like what he could be, because he hasn't had incredible stretches of health. And if he can remain healthy throughout the season, I mean, he was a blue chip recruit. He looks like a super twitched up athlete out there on the practice field. Maybe he can have a pretty nice impact on this offense, but I think this is an appropriate ranking for him.
Adam, what do you think? I mean, we're all pretty. I mean, you had him dead nuts, 23rd. He turns out 23rd. He's an important. He's an important dude. We feel like his role is going to be his role, which is important. But I tell you what, on a team with a lot of unknowns, a known quantity like a Jakai Douglas, especially a full year of him, I'm also kind of stoked to see Mr. Uyongalele start throwing some deep balls to this guy, right? That sounds like fun.
Yeah. So I put him at 23 because we've spent the entire offseason talking about wanting to see them run more crossing routes and things like that, man beaters. This is a guy that can do that. We saw a player similar in stature to him have success with DJ last year at Oregon State, and I can't think of the dude's
Silas
name.
Bolden?
Yeah, Silas Bolden.
There's two of them, really, two little 5'8" guys are really good.
We saw Jakai be a pretty important piece in the bowl game, and I know it was a nothing game, and there was only so many people available for it, but we saw them kind of dial some things up for him. I just think at this point, with what we know going on in the wide receiver room and what weapons are available, if you've got a guy that you feel like can change the numbers on the scoreboard, you better rank him high. Because
I agree.
They're all going to be important this year.
He has the potential. The crossing route thing, great point. He's got a potential to maybe even be like a security blanket type for Mr. DJ, and that could make me look stupid at the end of the year, which I would be cool with because I like Jakai a lot. Speaking of a guy that I want to have just a fantastic year, I've got a lot wrapped up in this from my Polynesian takeover of Florida State narrative that I really want to just shove down into everybody's throats. That's number 22, defensive end, redshirt senior transfer, Oregon State, a man of the islands, a man of my heart, Sione Lolohea.
Sure, he's going to be mad at me.
Could be worse.
I can't never say mad at you for too long. Zach had Mr. Lolohea at 20th, Adam 31st. Boo. Brendan 25th, Kev 28th, Chris 27th. I myself had him at 24th. I am not the highest on him. That is a disgrace to myself and the people with which
Should have ranked him first.
Yeah, the Delaware thing for you, the island people from dude. Now I'm embarrassed.
At least had a couple options.
At least Dane's smart. He had him at 19th. Clay had him at 26th. Dane, what do you see from Sione? I think that he was a very dependable hand at Oregon State, played really well, particularly against the run. I think with his motor and the guys that he's playing with on that defensive side of the ball, I think there's a potential to unlock that pass rush ability. Having a guy with a great motor, violent hands, and like crazy strength, opposite of a guy like a Patrick Payton or a Marvin Jones Jr., I like that combination. What did you see from Sione at practice? How did my guy integrate?
He looked pretty good. I mean, he's a starting quality defensive end, and that's always going to be something that should be like valued high, right? But yeah, you mentioned dependability. You mentioned like a guy who's going to be stout against the run and stuff, and in a light box like this, that's really important. So, I mean, I think he's just an important guy. Like if he were to go down, I think you would really feel that. So he should be ranked kind of as a starter, even if he doesn't end up being the starter. If it's Marvin Jones and Pat Payton on the outside or something. I think Sione is more than worthy of a ranking inside the top 20, like I have him here.
Adam, this is a defense that we don't know if it's going to be I don't think it's going to be as explosive or as talented on the edge as it was last year. That's what happens when you lose a first-round pick in Jared Verse. But this is a defense that we surmised all offseason that they were going to make it tough to move the ball against consistently with the depth, and they were going to be a hard team to run against. Why do you have Sione at 31st when we think that he's the best run stopping defensive end that we have and maybe the best running mate for guys that are more pass rush specialists like Patrick Payton and like Marvin Jones Jr.?
No, I think Pat Payton's the best run defender that you have on the edge.
Even better than Sione.
Yeah, I do. We'll see how that plays itself out. I'm sure Kev's got some fancy numbers that'll contradict that. But I like Sione. This was a tier and a range of ranking players where I just felt like it was like playing Parcheesi, like throw the dice in the little cup.
Is that Yahtzee?
Yahtzee, there you go.
What word did you even just say? How would you spell
Parcheesi?
I don't know. I could have put him 25. I could have put him 31. It just felt like I don't think that the ceiling's super duper high here, but I think the floor is really high, and that's nice. And ultimately, I just went with some guys that I thought would maybe make him more ceiling impact over him than ranking him higher.
Fair enough.
I think he's going to play a big role.
Before we move on, I thought there's a really interesting question.
Okay.
So someone asked if we're going to see more odd man fronts with Durojaiye and Lolohea. We actually saw a decent amount of odd fronts last year. I think FSU ran something like 25% odd fronts according to PFF. But yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question, right? Because Durojaiye and Lolohea are two bigger bodied ends, right? Two guys you could imagine kind of playing inside the tackles and more of like a 4-eye type thing.
Absolutely.
So odd front just means 3 down instead of 4 or 5 down. But
An odd number, yeah.
Yeah, I think they fit nicely into that. And I think they give you ability to kind of have that flexibility. I don't think that Pat Payton is someone you want to be playing in an odd front situation. So, being able to throw in a Durojaiye or Lolohea and seeing and being able to kind of do an odd front, or sometimes you'll see him even do kind of mixed fronts. Georgia does that a lot, where they'll kind of give a look where it's almost an odd front on one side and an even front on the other side, and they'll kind of mix it up. That was kind of the whole point of the Fox position a couple of years ago.
Throwback. Oh, I remember all that conversation.
And I actually went back. Durojaiye is 6'4", 275. Keir Thomas was 6'2", 275. So he's built like Keir Thomas is currently. So that is a position, the Fox being kind of that hybrid between an even odd idea of like a bigger bodied end that you can kind of play in that B gap. That's a possibility, and it's a real one. And I think having these kind of hybrid ends does give you some flexibility as second string guys.
Anything that can give my guy, the mad scientist Adam Fuller, more flexibility and scheme to throw out at people of this godforsaken conference, I'm all for it. I just want to see my guy Adam Fuller thrive and cook, and Sione will help him do that. 21st. This is another fun one too, and it's appropriate because he's a fun player. I am talking about wide receiver, running back, kick and punt return extraordinaire. Indiana transfer Jaylin Lucas. This one is funny because it is way all over the place. Zach had him at 14th. Adam had him at 10th. The 10th most important player on this roster was a special teamer from Indiana. Was a special teamer from Indiana. That's more fun to me than the Conrad one. So I'm going to go to you first after this. Brendan 22nd, Kev 32nd, Chris 19th. I had him at 35th. I was the low guy on him. Dane 24th, Clay 27th. Adam, I'm going to let you defend this because obviously positional ranking was important to you. You said production was important to you. Unless you're projecting like 13 special teams touchdowns, what the hell were you smoking having him 10th?
Yeah,
and I like this player.
I also
based
said
on your own methodology.
You left an important one out that I just said. Unless you're an offensive player who can change the scoreboard, because they don't have many of them this year, those guys took a heavy precedent for me, and that is why I aggressively ranked Jaylin Lucas.
He's never changed the scoreboard on offense, though, consistently his entire career.
He's never had an intelligent football coach like Mike Norvell.
That's a lot of projection.
What do you want me to tell you? He's been playing in freaking Indiana.
In your face, Tom something.
Allen.
Where
DC somewhere now.
Where did he, as far as like offensive skill players for you, was Jaylin Lucas your highest rated offensive skill player?
Oh, no. Malik Benson was. Well, technically DJ was, but Malik Benson's the highest.
So you have him rated higher. You have Jaylin Lucas rated higher than like a Roydell Williams or something like that?
No, I think Roydell's a spot ahead of him.
Do you have any defensive players in your top 10?
Yeah, absolutely.
You have 2 running backs in your top 10?
I think they're going to be desperate for production at the skill positions. Sorry.
I think having a range of opinions on this platform is a great thing. And I think having discourse like this is great, even if it's, really stretching the boundaries of sanity. But I think it's great.
This is a program that loves special teams. He's the best kick returner in the nation. By far. It's not even close.
By far. Okay. Sure.
It's not even close. He is ridiculously.
Whoa. Call back. Keep going.
He's ridiculously dynamic as a runner. We've seen what he can do. We know how much Mike Norvell loves screen game. Okay, you get him involved in the screen game, and he's one of the few guys that can go 80. Guess what this offense wants to do? Go 80.
Max, get me hyped up.
It just is what it is. I mean, I knew I was going to be an outlier putting him up there, but they need dudes that can score points in chunks.
Yeah.
How many touches do you think he's going to get per game on the offensive side of the ball? Because I'm with you, dude. He's got he's a point getter, but I mean, you got to have enough at bats. So, but you're based on you ranking him 10th, you think that he's going to get a lot of at bats on the offensive side of the ball.
No, I mean, what's a lot?
Okay, then I don't know, dude. You ranked him 10th. You've ranked him 10th. So you think that he's actually going to get a lot of touches on the offensive side of the ball?
I think he's going to get his fair share of touches. Yeah.
How many do you think? You have him as your 10th?
No clue.
You had him at 10. Throw a number.
Yeah, you had him at 10.
I have no clue.
You've said this.
Well, you have a damn clue. You had him at 10.
Listen, Adam,
why do I need to put a number?
Adam, because you said this you've said this entire hour. Your list was based on what you think is actually going to happen this year. What you think is going to happen. So you think that he's going to be the 10th most important player on this entire football team. So based off that, how many touches on the offensive side of the ball do you think that he's going to get to end up being the 10th most important
do
player?
I need to say I don't know? I'm not sitting here thinking about how many
you
touches.
did.
And Trey asked the same question.
And I've given the same answer.
Damn quarter, AB.
I don't know how many touches they're going to have per game. I don't know how many average touches they're going to have per game.
I know, but like, do you think you have him 10th?
I think he's going to average 25 touches a game? No. That's ludicrous.
Then why do you have him as your 10th most rated player?
Because he's one of the few guys that can change the scoreboard.
You lost me on this one because I was with you on production, prove it on the field, and based on what they're going to be at the end of the year. Kev, you had him at 32nd. I have him at 35th. I think he's one of the best special teams players in the entire country. I actually maybe underrated him a little bit because if he can unlock the punt return game, that makes him more important. But I think that he's a guy that maybe gets like 6 touches a game on the offensive side of the ball. Kev, what do you think? Now, I could look like a fool if they integrate him because Indiana's dumb. They should have integrated him way more on that side of the ball, but they didn't. There's a lot of mouths to feed on that side in that position. What do you think, Kev?
I'm at a loss for who's going to be your offensive playmakers, who's going to be the guys you're going to lean on. And I kind of did exactly what AB did, but the opposite, where I said, well, if I've got a bunch of people that I don't know who's the standout out of all of them, then their wins above replacement are relatively low. And so then I put, look at this, Jaylin Lucas 32, Jakai Douglas 33, Kentron Poitier 34.
Kind of a glob. Yeah.
I just globbed all the receivers I didn't know what to do with together because I'm like, I think Jaylin Lucas is the most talented of the three. I know Jakai Douglas can do it against good teams, and I've seen Kentron Poitier do it against NFL cornerbacks. So these guys, I just kind of threw them in there and said, well, there's a glob of guys that could be important.
For the record, though, I do like the line of thinking that AB has of like, you need guys that are going to put points on the board. And like what Kev is saying, like when your wins above replacement isn't high for a guy or something, you're essentially saying like, that's probably not like a scoreboard changer. Jaylin Lucas can be a scoreboard changer. So I totally like the idea of having, I mean, like we're clowning on it. As Zach him at 14, like Chris him at 19. I mean, I had him at 20. Like it's not all that far off. I just think like that top 10 tier is kind of saved for like your bona fide starters and important guys on like certain spots. I don't know, whatever. But yeah, no. I mean, he's a guy who's going to put points on the board, or he's going to be able to in a different way and at a high level than other guys. So his wins above replacement, even if his touches aren't great, you know, on average, like AB's kind of alluding to, like who knows, doesn't really matter. Those touches could be really impactful at like a higher rate than other guys.
If there was a list of players I was most excited about, top 10 seems reasonable.
If
Sure.
Jaylin Lucas is one of the top 10 most important players of Florida State at the end of the season, this is going to be like the most fun offense to watch, like in the history of college football. I hope it is, dude, because that kid rules. He rules. He was the king of the spring. He came out of nowhere, and he is going to score. He's going to score touchdowns. I agree. Hold on.
We've
So
done a full
he's going to
heel
score
turn on.
touchdowns.
Yeah,
He's
but
gonna
not
score
like
touchdowns.
17 like you think. He's going to have like 4 touchdowns at the end of the year.
We
You
gave
think
him
he's
out
gonna
a
have 4
cookie
touchdowns
right
at the end
here.
of the year?
Well, how many do you think? Because now you're trying to hold me to numbers. How many touchdowns do you think he's
I-
going to have? 15? Because I think he'll have like I'd go. He'll have
15. No, I don't think he's going to have 15.
he'll have 5 touchdowns. Jalen Lucas.
You
will
think
have
he'll
in
have
the first-
5?
Yes.
I mean, I'll take the over on that for sure.
Okay, then how about you give me a number?
All right.
I
How
think
many
5.
touchdowns did Trey Benson have last year?
I don't know.
4
I'm asking how
I
many.
don't know
He had
either.
like
I wasn't
15.
prepared for that.
He had a
for
lot.
freaking
He had a lot of
conversation.
touchdowns.
All right, let's say he had 15. How many is Jalen Lucas?
I
gonna
don't
have?
know.
He had 15 last year.
I don't
No,
know.
he had 14. Dane, how
Oh,
could he be
well,
so
you're
far
not
off?
damn good.
All right, I think 5 for Jalen.
No, wait, he had 15 total because he had receiving.
Okay. I'll put
Nailed
him.
it,
I'll
Dane.
put him in the 7, 8, 9 range, somewhere in that ballpark.
You were looking at me like I was a prostitute with a boob growing out of my forehead for 5, and you're putting him down for
Kid
7.
show.
8 or 9. That's just offense. I
Oh,
mean,
Jesus God.
then you got to
Then 8
factor.
or 9 special teams.
But I mean, okay, all right.
Guys, this is the
special teams
beauty.
guy
This
too
is the
without
beauty of
Andy.
the most
This has
important
been
list.
great.
This is the type of banner
Is he
you're
worth
going to
20
get
points?
every single week on this show. Go to Noles247.com if you haven't. Go in the comment section. Go on the board. Who do you agree with? Do you agree with everyone? Do you agree with Adam? Do you agree with Kev, me, Dane, Zach, whatever? Agree, disagree. This is the fun time of the year. We are going to have 10 more coming at you every week. We're creeping closer and closer to that sacred top 10. I had a blast. I'll be honest with you. I don't know who's right and who's wrong, but I always have fun hashing it out with my 3 amigos, and we'll be doing that every single week. Nobody's wrong. The only people that aren't wrong is if you're not a Noles247.com subscriber, because you miss out on all this. For Kevin, for Adam, for Dane, opposite with the camera, I am Trey Rowland. I had a blast. I hope you guys did too. Stay tuned for more fun and entertainment from Noles 24/7. Keep chopping. Love you all.